Okay, Janet, it just came on the YouTube channel.
And it does say we're streaming live on YouTube right now.
Yes. So on my iPad is I have the APCD YouTube channel and it just popped up. So once we get started, it'll go live.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's interesting, Angie. It already populated the title of the meeting.
Oh, perfect. The YouTube channel.
Okay. Okay, shall I start?
Yes. Or yes. I was gonna start and then start the meeting and then Frida will be host and you and I will be co-hosts.
Oh, okay. Oh my God. I'm hearing both. Oh my God. Oh. Shall I start?
You're hearing you. What are you hearing, Janet?
I think you can mute yourself, Janet.
Oh my God. Okay, hang on.
Just one suggestion for anybody who is not speaking, it would be best if you mute yourself.
Yep. The YouTube is now live.
Suggestion for anybody who's not speaking, it would be best if you mute yourself.
YouTube is now live.
Janet, if you can please open the meeting so everybody can join.
Okay, Frida, you should be the host right now. Can you make us co-host, Angie and I?
Already did.
Okay, thank you. I will start now.
Good evening, Jim. Would you like to go ahead and start?
Yeah. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Swinney with the Air Pollution Control District. We do have Spanish interpretation available, and Ms. Frida Bloom will go over that.
Thank you, Mr. Swinney. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Frida, and I'll be your interpreter this evening. Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Frida y seré su intérprete esta tarde. I'll give this message both in English and in Spanish. Daré este mensaje tanto en inglés como en español. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous bidirectional interpretation into English and Spanish. If you're bilingual, you don't have to click anything. But if you're not bilingual into English and Spanish and you're on your laptop, locate the icon shaped like a globe at the bottom of your screen, click on language interpretation and then select English. If you're on your phone or an iPad or a similar device, then locate the three-dot menu in the upper right corner of your screen, click on language interpretation and then select English. When you speak, do so at a moderate pace because the interpreter is going to be simultaneously interpreting everything you say. A efecto de proporcionar acceso lingüístico, esta reunión va a contar con interpretación simultánea bidireccional al inglés y al español. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada, pero si usted no es bilingüe en inglés y en español y está en su computadora, por favor localice el icono en forma de globo que está en la parte inferior de su pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish. Si usted está en su teléfono, su iPad o un dispositivo similar, entonces localice el menú de 3 puntos que está en la parte superior derecha de la pantalla, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y después seleccione español o Spanish. Cuando hable, hágalo en español y las intérpretes estarán interpretando simultáneamente todo lo que usted diga. Antes de que me vaya, ¿alguien tiene una pregunta respecto a la interpretación? Before I go, does anyone have a question regarding interpretation? If not, we may begin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, good evening, and thank you for attending this public meeting to discuss the status of the Aerotoxic Hotspots program in San Diego County. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and is being broadcast via the Air Pollution Control District's YouTube page. You can search for San Diego APCD on YouTube for that. We would like to start this meeting by introducing the panel members. I'm Jim Swaney, a senior engineer with the Air Pollution Control District, and I supervise the team that implements the Hotspots program.
Good evening. My name is Mohsen Nazemi. Welcome to the San Diego Air Pollution Control District Aerotoxic Hotspots public meeting. I am the Chief of Engineering Division in charge of permitting, emission inventory, and air toxic hotspots. And Maini?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Mayani Luther. Currently, I am the Acting Deputy Director of the district overseeing compliance and engineering.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Ryder, Interim Director at the APCD, and I'll turn it over to John from the California Office of Health Hazard Assessment to introduce himself.
Good evening. My name is John Boudreau. I'm the Chief of the Air Toxicology and Risk Assessment Section of the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment.
Thank you. So for those of you that are not very familiar with the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District, or APCD or district, our mission is to improve air quality and to protect public health and the environment. The Aerotoxic Hotspots program is essential to support our mission as it protects your right to know about air toxic emissions and how these emissions can potentially impact your health, and requires health risk reductions for facilities that might present a public health concern. Under this program, the APCD is required to prepare an annual report. The report we are discussing this evening was prepared to meet this requirement for calendar years 2019 and 2020 and describes the APCD's ongoing efforts to regulate and reduce air toxic emissions in San Diego County. Our goal this evening is to receive input related to the draft report, but first we would like to provide a brief overview of the Aerotoxic Hotspots program. And we would appreciate it if you can hold your comments and questions until the end of the presentation. The Hotspots program was enacted in 1987 to require stationary sources of air toxics to disclose and report their emissions to be evaluated for public health risks. Then, based on the level of emissions and health risk, the program requires public notification and risk reduction for sources that might present a public health concern. So what is a stationary source? These are facilities permitted by the district, including manufacturing operations, power plants, and other industrial, commercial, and governmental operations. And toxic air contaminants are chemicals in the form of gases, liquids, or particles that are emitted into the atmosphere, and when people are exposed to them, may cause adverse health effects. An example of a toxic air contaminant is diesel particulate matter, or diesel PM, which is emitted from diesel engines. Adverse health effects can range from symptoms such as minor eye or throat irritation, shortness of breath, or headaches, to more permanent and serious conditions such as cancer, birth defects, or damage to the lungs, liver, heart, or other organs. The nature and severity of health effects vary by the type and quantity of pollutants, the length of the exposure, and the sensitivity of the individual. The district is responsible for implementing the Aerotoxics Hotspots program in San Diego County by first quantifying emissions of toxic air contaminants reported by stationary sources, then identifying the facilities that might present a public health concern based on the calculated emissions. And why do we do that? It's so we can require health risk assessments from those facilities that might present a public health concern. Health risk assessments calculate the potential health risks. And then we implement the public notification and risk reduction requirements through District Rule 1210, which establishes the notification and risk reduction thresholds and procedures. The draft report we are discussing this evening provides information on these requirements by listing the facilities for which the district quantified toxic emissions, the facilities that are required to conduct a health risk assessment, and the facilities subject to public notification and risk reduction requirements. This table provides a summary of the key milestones we just discussed. Please note that under the program, larger stationary sources are subject to individual reporting requirements, while facilities that are generally small businesses, such as gas stations, emergency diesel engine-only sources, auto body shops, perfluoroethylene dry cleaners, are in the industry-wide source categories. And we have approximately 2,600 of those smaller facilities. The numbers reported on this slide are for the larger stationary sources and does not include those industry-wide inventories. The draft report provides information regarding different types of estimated health risks and how your health can be potentially impacted by air toxic emissions. Specifically, the report has information regarding cancer risk, health hazard indices, and cancer burden. Cancer risk is expressed in terms of the increased number of chances in 1 million of developing cancer. For example, a cancer risk of 1 in 1 million indicates a likelihood that up to one person out of 1 million equally exposed people would contract cancer. Now, the health hazard indices are calculated for acute exposure or short-term health impacts such as skin or eye irritation, and chronic exposure or long-term health impacts such as bronchitis or asthma. A health hazard index above 1 indicates that there may be greater potential for adverse health impacts from exposure to the toxic air contaminants. And cancer burden is an estimate of the number of potential excess cancer cases within the population that would be exposed to the emissions. District Rule 1210 establishes thresholds and procedures for public notification and risk reduction requirements for the different types of health risks as shown on the slide. Public notification is a core element of the program as it ensures the public's right to know about possible health risks from exposure to toxic air contaminants emitted by stationary sources of air pollution in their communities. And risk reduction requirements involve the development and implementation of a plan to reduce air toxic emissions and the risk. The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, developed the Aerotoxics Hotspots program requirements. However, local air districts, such as the San Diego APCD, are required to implement and enforce the requirements by applying guidance developed by the State Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or OEHA. OEHA is the scientific branch of the California Environmental Protection Agency, which evaluates the effects of toxic compounds, develops health protective exposure levels, and develops guidelines on how to evaluate health risks from toxic air contaminants. The OEHA guidelines contain a comprehensive procedure on how to perform health risk assessments under this program. In March of 2015, OEHA enhanced its health risk assessment guidelines to reflect scientific advances in the field of toxic exposures, health effects, and risk assessment, along with explicit consideration of younger populations. Since OEHA has a very critical role in the implementation of this program, we have John Boudreau, Chief of the Air Toxicology and Risk Assessment Section at OEHA, with us, who will further discuss the changes in the OEHA guidelines adopted in 2015. John?
Okay, first slide. Good evening, and thanks for having me here. Next slide. Just to put my department into context, we're one of 6 departments within the California Environmental Protection Agency. And we have the responsibility for a number of chemical risk assessment programs. Examples of those programs, the Hotspots program, our portion of the Toxic Air Contaminants program, and the Proposition 65. Next slide. Now, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or OEHA, is mandated under AB 2588 to develop risk assessment guidelines for air toxics assessments. These guidelines are used in evaluating the potential health impacts from stationary sources of air pollution to people who are near those sources. And this assessment includes estimating cancer risk and non-cancer health hazards from exposure to the chemicals emitted by those facilities. Next slide. Now, question is, why the updates to the 2015 guidance manual? And the reason for that is the legislature passed the Children's Environmental Health Protection Act in 1999. That law requires us to explicitly consider the special susceptibility of infants and children and other sensitive populations when assessing risk from air toxics. And this triggered a reassessment of our risk assessment guidelines. Next slide. So we revised our technical support documents and our guidelines documents. And this was done after consultation with the Air Resources Board and the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, public review, and then scientific peer review by the scientific review panel. So in 2008, we adopted the derivation of non-cancer reference exposure levels, technical support document, or TSD. And in this document, we adjusted the uncertainty factors contained within that document to reflect infant and child sensitivity to air toxics. And I have a link at the end of that bullet point that has the web address of the document on our website. Basically, in facility HR health risk assessments, emitted concentrations are compared to reference exposure levels to determine the hazard index that is generated in the facility health risk assessment. Uncertainty factors are used to develop reference exposure levels from toxicity data. And then in 2009, we had developed revised the cancer potency factors TSD. And this added age sensitivity factors. These factors reflect the fact that infants and children are more sensitive than adults to carcinogens. Children exposed to carcinogens have more time through their life to develop cancer after being exposed to a carcinogen. And they also have developing organ systems that are more sensitive to carcinogens than similar organ systems in adults. Next slide, please. So in 2015, we released the guidance manual for the preparation of health risk assessments. And the guidance manual basically integrates the information from the 3 technical support documents into a user manual for conducting health risk assessments. So essentially, the guidance manual is the cookbook for doing health risk assessments under the Hotspots program. Next slide, please. So the key changes in the 2015 guidance manual, the cancer risk assessment section takes into account the increased infant and child sensitivity, the chemicals that cause cancer compared to adults, the sensitivity of adults. It includes updated breathing rates that account for the higher exposures that are observed in younger age groups. It included the upgraded air modeling. And these changes were basically made because our understanding of the health risks from chemical exposures improved. And it's important to note that the underlying risks didn't change. It was our understanding of those risks improved. So it was better methodology for determining the underlying risks. So that concludes my presentation, Jim.
Thank you, John. So for the next steps, tonight we will take your input and answer questions. If you have further comments after tonight that you want to be considered for inclusion in the report that will go to our board, please submit them by the close of business next Monday, April 26th. We will present the report to the APCD Governing Board at their May 7th meeting and ask them to approve the distribution of the report. Then we will distribute the final report. And most importantly, we will continue implementing the requirements of the program. As previously mentioned, our primary goal this evening is to receive your input and feedback. If you have questions or comments, please raise your hand to be unmuted. And if you have comments after this meeting, please use the email address listed in the meeting notice. And thank you.
Thank you, Jim and John, for the presentation. Sometimes technical staff use acronyms, and if there were any acronyms that you didn't know about, we apologize. We can explain to you what they are. And so with that, I would like to open the meeting to public comments. And Janet, if you can please let us know if there is anybody who wants to make any comments or ask any questions, and we can start that.
Yes, I've just requested that Sarah Giobi unmute herself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. First, I'll observe that your report seems to have a new format to it and includes a lot of information that hadn't previously been included, including prioritization scores. But also what's kind of curiously missing is in past years, you've shown the tremendous strides, I think, that have been made in reducing air quality emissions throughout the San Diego Basin. So you used to give figures for stationary, mobile area, natural sources, as well as kind of providing an overview of what the individual contributions of those are. I think that was really helpful for people to understand the overall contribution of stationary sources relative to other sources of pollution. And so I'd like to suggest that that continue to be included. I'd also like to ask regarding Appendix A2, is that correct and up to date? So with that, I will let you answer the questions. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Let's take Appendix A2 question first. By Jim probably can give you an update on that.
Sure.
And by the way, this is, Sarah, this is a draft report. So we are, as we speak, we are making it even more updated. So there will be probably minor changes to the report before it goes to the board as a final report. But Jim, do you want to answer?
And thank you for the input too. And I guess I would say also 2 business days for commenting is pretty short.
Well, the report has been released earlier. It's not only 2 business days, but you can continue to provide us input suggestions like you had tonight, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so for Appendix A2 within the report, that was up to date as of the date of the publication of the draft report. And we are in the process of updating any changes to, any revisions to the emissions, any revisions to prioritization scores, any revisions to health risk assessment requirements. And those will be included in the report that goes to the board.
And Mayani, did you want to add something about the change in the format of the report relative to previous years? And I'll start with helping to answer that. And Sarah, that's a good point. We appreciate the question. It's a great comment. However, this report really specifically focuses on stationary sources, emissions, and risk associated with those sources. And therefore, we wanted to make sure the focus of the report is what are the risks from stationary sources. And you're absolutely correct. There are other sources of air pollution that contribute to the ambient concentrations of especially air toxics, and mobile sources are a big contributor to that, especially in terms of diesel particulate. But again, this is a state mandated program that looks at what are the risks from stationary sources, and what the public should learn about sources that have risks above certain thresholds, and what those sources may be able to do to reduce their risk. But,
Understandable, but you've also completely deleted the progress being made by stationary sources there. So it used to show the trends even in those emissions over time. What has been left in is the risk numbers. But of course, you know, the risk numbers now are higher than they were a few years ago. And it's, you know, for all the reasons that were explained here, obviously, but I think it's just really helpful for people to understand that those emissions have gone down over time, even though the risk has gone up, or the calculated risk has gone up. So as Mr. Boudreau said, it's not that the actual risk went up, but our understanding of the risk has changed. So, you know, it's just helpful. You know, we know with risk communication, this is scary. This is a tough topic to talk about, and people can come away with misunderstandings. So it just probably need to be mindful that helping people put that in context of the bigger picture is a good thing. And showing the progress that have been made in air quality in the basin is a good thing. And it's just a little puzzling as to why the district would want to take that out of its documents. I'm going to step back now and let other people ask questions.
thank you for your comments, Sarah. We'll take that into consideration. Janet, are there any other comments?
Yes, Joy Williams.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And thank you for holding this workshop. First, I guess I'd like to add my agreement with Sarah that I like seeing the prioritization scores in the new report format. We've never seen that before, and those are very interesting. I have a question about, I guess, why diesel PM emissions are not included in inventories or apparently in the prioritization scores. And, you know, whenever I've gone to the CARB facility database search tool, you can get air toxics inventories that do include diesel, or estimates of diesel. I understand those are estimates. So it does appear that there's a methodology for estimating those emissions. So I guess I'm not sure why they're not included for the air toxics inventories or prioritization scores.
So Joy, they actually are included. It might be a little difficult to see that. Within the report, we're giving the total toxic emissions by facility. We're not breaking it down within the report. And diesel PM is included in the prioritization scores for cancer risk. That is actually the basis for the prioritization scores from diesel equipment.
It is, but they're not included in the inventories, is that right?
No, they are included in the inventory.
Okay, I misread something then. I thought they were left out, but thank you for that clarification.
If I may add something, I think, Joy, what you might be referring to is that we have a graph in the report that conveys the concentrations that are measured by our monitoring stations, actually carbon monitoring stations located in El Cajon and Chula Vista. And that measurement does not include diesel PM. That's the only thing that excludes diesel PM. But, you know, absolutely. In fact, diesel PM is what triggered a lot of, health risk assessment. So it's definitely 100% included into the inventory. It's just that one graph that, again, discusses the concentrations that are measured by CARB at these two locations exclude diesel PM.
Okay, thank you, Miney.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions, Janet?
No, I do not see any more raised hands at this time.
Well, if
I
you
do
have
have
any
one
other
more.
questions, go ahead.
Yes. Monica Melgoza.
Hi, sorry, just making a comment. I don't know if you can disable the chat if people want to make a comment through the chat. I don't know if that's a possibility to do. Just an observation. I don't know if people are shy sometimes to speak.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Oh,
Hi, this is Rob Ryder. I received a comment. Someone was having a hard time logging, getting connection for their comment. So it was 2 days. They're concerned about the 2-day turnaround. I believe that's referring to, are we saying we want comments 2 days after today? Is that the deadline for our comments?
Yeah, so I can kind of start addressing that a little bit. You know, we released this report about 3 weeks ago. So we conducted extensive outreach. We sent it out to thousands. We sent out to the permit holders. We sent out to, you know, community partners. We sent out via our listserv subscription. And, you know, it essentially went to thousands of addresses and emails, and we post on our website. It's posted in Spanish and in English. So, you know, it's not, so essentially there's been already 3 weeks for comments on this report. And I mean, we're certainly open to additional input. But this report is essentially just conveying facts. Most of it is just numbers. And you know, we're not going through a rulemaking process. We're not proposing any new initiative or strategy. We're essentially conveying what we've done. And, you know, everything that is in that report is just facts. So, but again, you know, we would certainly appreciate any comments that you convey to us. You know, it's just that we're planning to take the report to the board on May 7th. That's going to also be a public hearing. And, you know, we have some time limits to finalize the report to be able to present to our governing board.
I also received a comment. Someone's asking if this would be next going to the APCD Advisory Committee. I can speak to that. We are currently in a transition. We just left the County Board of Supervisors as our governing board, and now we have a new 11-member board, including public members. We have the new board has yet to weigh in on the existence, the continuation of the advisory committee or not. And so indeed, we're not planning to take this report to the advisory committee. In lieu of that, though, we want to make sure we're reaching out to every stakeholder that was represented by the advisory committee, including industry representatives, environmental representatives, and the public. And so while we're not going to the advisory committee, we are conducting extensive outreach, and we need your input. So thank you very much.
We have a couple more hands raised. Sarah Giobi again.
Yeah, this is just an easy question, I think, but I was wondering if you can explain why some facilities in Appendix B1 are there if they actually have 0 scores all the way across the way. And maybe you can define kind of what it means to be a large stationary source, or why you're included in that table if you've got zeros all the way across.
Sure, I can handle that. So different facilities have different emissions, and not all of the emissions have we established toxicity values for. And so if a facility is showing as 0, either it means that they didn't do anything, didn't have any emissions that year. Perhaps they shut down that year, but still had their permits active. Or the emissions they had are not ones that have health values that can be evaluated.
Thanks, Jim.
Sarah, we appreciate you and Jay and others, Joy and others who have read this report, actually have questions on the contents. Thank you.
We have another hand raised. Jen Hazy.
Jen, you probably have to unmute yourself also.
There you go.
There you go.
Hi, I'm signed into my daughter's Zoom account. Sorry, I had to switch laptops because I didn't have any audio. I have the issue with only 2 business days and not having an advisory board committee meeting, because I think you used to get more comments during the advisory board committee. Thank you, Tom Gardner, who's no longer here around, but an input as to what is in the report and not. And you're on a fast crash course to get this to the new advisory board that isn't, I don't think, frankly, educated enough to be able to be dealing with a hotspots report. And if you've done the homework and educating them, I just think you are just on a whirlwind. And I just want to make a note and a record that I have an issue with that.
Thank you, Jen.
Laurie. I think it's Laurie, right?
This is Laurie. Sorry, mine.
Laurie has. I recognize your voice. Well, thank you for your comment, and we'll take that into consideration. We appreciate it.
I personally have not read the report. I've got emission inventories, fleet reporting. I mean, this is reporting time of the season, and I haven't had the ability to do a deep dive into it. And so now you're saying I spend my weekend getting reports done and looking at hotspots bills to get comments back. And it's just, I think it's too fast, but that's my opinion. So.
And again, thank you, Lori. The report wasn't released today and asked for 2 days comments, but we appreciate your sentiments here.
I guess I missed that in the notification that you wanted them by Monday.
Yes. Neil Davenport.
Thank you. I have a question from the report. It seems to be pretty clear how categories A, B, and C are defined relative to the long table of prioritization scores. But I did also observe that there have been recent HRAs requested, processed, and even approved that fall into category B, not just category A. It's clear that risk assessments have been requested and prepared both last year and prior years. And I believe the districts indicated there's another wave or batch of HRAs coming due this summer. Could you add additional context about how the district selects facilities beyond just what's represented with this category A and B definition?
Right, so currently we are only requiring health risk assessments for the facilities in category A. What you may be seeing is that if a health risk assessment was originally requested and then the facility came back and provided some additional information, if we recalculated the scores and they were now as a B, they would still show up as a health risk assessment required. We may have canceled or rescinded that requirement and they show up as a B category now.
I think that I should also add that perhaps, I just wanted to remind everyone that we request health risk assessment based on cancer risk and also chronic and acute index. So it's very possible that these facilities that are not category A for cancer, trigger the threshold for chronic and acute health risks. But as Jim said, we only require for this report, the district only require health risk assessments for category A's.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil.
Right now, we don't have any more hand raised, but the chat is opened up to anyone that would like to.
I put the engineering email address. Of course, you all are welcome to contact us. Our email is on over here. And so you can contact any of us. And I did include the engineering email on the chat.
So Miney, this email that you put in is if anybody wants to submit any comments after tonight's meeting, please use that email address.
Right. And I mean, also, we are always, available for questions and to listen to your comments or anything else. I just wanted to make it there very clear that it doesn't mean that after next week, we can't be contacted. We can be contacted anytime for any reason. And so, it's just that we have some timelines to complete the report.
I have a hand raised. Jack Shu.
Hello, this is Jack Shu. I'm actually on the governing board of the APCD now, and I listened today and watched today to learn as much as I can in this steep learning curve of being on the board and the new board. I just wanted to get on and say I appreciate all the public comments and people participating in this process. I'm learning a lot very quickly, and also wanted to thank the staff for putting on this event so that I can learn more and the public still has a chance to comment during these days of the pandemic. So the board is at least me, and there may be other board members on this event tonight, so that we are learning and we hope to do a good job. I think my other board members are really looking forward to making APCD work for all of us here in San Diego. So thank you.
Thank board member Shu for your comments. Appreciate it. And actually, there is a question, or actually more like a comment in the chat. And let me read this, and Rob and Miney, and you can decide how to answer this. But there's a comment from, I can't see the name, but maybe Janet will let us know who that is.
Yes.
Hi, I am not aware of the context of this meeting, and I would like to see the report referred to sometime. So again, we will definitely provide you with the link so you can actually see the report. And the comment goes on to say, however, I would like to inquire about the lack of EPA certified air pollution ozone O3 monitors in most of San Diego County. How and when can we improve this so that employees can be protected by two California OSHA Office of Safety Health, anyway, Cal OSHA rules, which are currently being violated nearly every week by all companies, but nobody is monitoring. I am sickened most days at work from car pollution, but employee protection laws cannot be enforced without measurement. Thanks, Brian S. So Brian, thank you for your comment. And I think Piney is providing the link to the report in the chat. So if you'd like to read the report, please go ahead and do that. And as far as additional ozone monitors, I'm not sure if Rob, did you want to add anything here relative to, the San Diego County does have ambient monitors, and as you heard Jim talked about some of those being run by California Air Resources Board as well. So Rob, do you want to add some?
Sure. Thanks for the comment. It is resource intensive air quality monitoring. So we do have approximately 10 air monitors around the region that are primarily funded by EPA and the state. And we are, when we cite the location of where we're going to monitor air pollution, there are some strict state and federal criteria that we must meet to ensure that our measurements are representative of the population at large. And so we do try to locate the monitors we have near population centers, downwind of pollution sources. But unfortunately, with limited resources, we can't, there is a limit to how many monitors we can put out in the network. So we do meet federal and state criteria for citing the number of monitors. As regarding OSHA requirements, I know less about that, frankly. I know that APCD does not have jurisdiction over interior air quality. We certainly do over external air quality. And perhaps, Brian, I could leave my contact information if there's something specific I can help you with and look into. I'll certainly do that. But in general, it's a kind of a broad observation that I'm not able to answer specifically, except to say that we do have ozone monitors around the region where they're needed most in compliance with federal and state citing criteria and based on available resources at our disposal.
Right, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
And then if I may, I think that, this, admittedly, this is a very complicated topic, and so I think that, since Brian expressed some confusion about what this meeting is about, but just to really summarize, the bottom line is that, state law established requirements to, quantify emissions of toxic pollutants, as well as to estimate the potential health risk from these pollutants. And local air districts such as San Diego APCD are responsible for implementing these requirements locally. So our agency, APCD, is responsible for implementing these requirements in San Diego County. So essentially, we quantify emissions from stationary sources, which are, power plants, gas stations, coating operations, and, sources that can emit air pollution. And then we quantify these emissions, and then we determine, we select the facilities that might create a potential, public health concern. Those facilities, they have to conduct what we call a health risk assessment, which again, these health risk assessments quantify the potential health risk from these facilities. And, facilities that present an elevated health risk, they needed to, conduct public notification and or, reduce the health risks. So that's a very brief kind of, summary of what this program is about. And we are here tonight because we are publishing a report that essentially summarizes what we've done to implement the requirements of this program. So it's what we implemented and how we implemented. So that's a very brief summary. I do realize this is a very complex topic, but I just kind of want to break it down, and hopefully this was somewhat helpful.
If I may just add it, thanks so much, Marnie, because that adds more context, which I think is needed regarding motor vehicle pollution. So the APCD does not have direct authority to regulate motor vehicle pollution. This particular program we're talking about tonight is associated with facility emissions, things that don't move, not the cars, but the facilities themselves, like Marnie said, the power plants, et cetera. But regarding motor vehicles, we do have a separate process where we're requiring emission reductions from the transportation fleet. In fact, SANDAG is obligated to reduce the total air pollution from motor vehicles operating in the region by 30% between 2020 and 2026, and then by 40% between 2020 and 2032. So motor vehicle emissions there's a mandate for the total emissions from motor vehicles to come down in the San Diego region. And that is an enforceable mandate. And San Diego won't be able to get its transportation plan approved unless it demonstrates it can meet that mandate. So while we don't directly regulate motor vehicle pollution, there are mechanisms to ensure motor vehicle pollution is controlled and reduced. And frankly, regarding ozone, it's the #1 source of pollution. So it's Brian, you bring up a great point about motor vehicles. I just want to draw that distinction. This report, as Miney said, is about the stationary facilities themselves, not the motor vehicles that we drive to and from facilities and all that pollution, which is very significant, but not the focus of this particular report. Thank you.
I do have one hand raised. Brian?
Hi, thanks all for responding to what I typed in the chat. This is Brian Shuck. So now I understand, and Rob, you were very clear in what this meeting is versus what I brought up. So I will add to clarify, I am good at being vague. I did that well. So now I'll be specific. I work in Rancho Bernardo. I live in Escondido. Many days, surely of every week, my health is affected by the ozone levels, which ozone doesn't hurt me. That's just an indicator of the toxins that the cars are emitting. I know this is off topic, but I'm here because I'm concerned because there are no monitors of even ozone in either Rancho Bernardo or Escondido. We have some by the ocean where the air is clean and some way out near Alpine. And I cannot use that to tell my employer that they're in violation many days of each year because, there's a also this outdoor air you mentioned. So temporary COVID emergency law says suck in all the ventilation you can. My employer did that. So now when the air quality index exceeds the temporary Cal OSHA COVID standard of 100 AQI, they're supposed to not suck that in anymore. But they said they refused to do that and I can leave work early, but that doesn't protect my peers or any other employees. So because of COVID, outdoor air pollution is being brought in to reduce COVID risk, even though air pollution increases risk of contracting COVID and the severity, but that's beyond my topic. So I don't have monitors anywhere. They're just on the edges of the county. I cannot use the levels that I see as estimated by the data of weather underground that matches what I feel each day, has no EPA monitors anywhere near Rancho Bernardo or Escondido. That's my main goal here. Please help me improve this within the next year. I don't care about 10 years from now. Things will change in 10 years. I care about now. Thank you all.
Brian, thanks for clarifying. I agree with the points you made. We don't have a monitor near Escondido, for example. We have long had a monitor in Escondido, but the landowner, who happens to be the city of Escondido, had another purpose for that land, so we needed to move, and so we're in the process of moving the Escondido monitor to a new site. I fear I don't know the exact time frame for it to be up and operational, but I do know we're working earnestly to get all the agreements and electricity and everything else we need for the new site in Escondido. But we'll provide more information in a workshop report where we will document this question and answer it more fully and make sure you get a copy of that report. But there is a plan to resume air quality monitoring in Escondido. It's just a matter of we had to relocate the monitor, and so we're in the process of doing that.
So I'm just going to add to this, Brian, the district does have an air quality complaint program as well. I just want to, just for your awareness. So if you have a concern specific to a source, whether it's a mobile source or a stationary source, any source of air pollution, you can contact us and we will conduct an investigation. You know, I don't know if this is, I know this is unrelated to your comment, but I just, for your awareness, I want to make sure you know this. But we'll be happy if you send us your contact, we'll be happy to provide more specific information. We're actually not going to be providing a report for this meeting, but you know, we will certainly provide any information you need pertaining to your questions and concerns if you provide your contact information.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. That was my mispronouncement about a report for this. I wasn't aware of that. Nevertheless, as Mike said, we'll get you the information you need, and please let us know. We have that air pollution complaint line. We can respond that way too, but we'll circle back.
Janet, any other hands raised or questions?
Yes. Lori Hazy.
Hi, Janet.
Hi.
So with that comment with regarding no report, that means you're not responding to any of the workshop comments? What do you mean by no report?
So we are not required to, this is not, you know, we're not going through a rulemaking process, and we're not required to publish a workshop report for this. But, you know, we will certainly, you know, respond to every comment that we received, but we're not gonna, you know, I mean, typically when we propose rules, we publish a workshop report, but this is different because we're not, again, we're not proposing a new rule or a new initiative. This is just a report of actions that the district took as it relates to the Hotspots program.
I guess my biggest concern is with the change in the format and some of Sarah's comments of taking out the comparisons of other toxics and making the perspective of what a stationary source's emissions are at 3% versus the rest of the county. It makes it assume that all the toxic hotspots are all associated with facilities. And I think having that perspective, making you guys put on your show of how great the reductions have been, all of the achievements that have been achieved in the last 20 years of how much they've been reduced. I think that component needs to be included in the report to give everybody a perspective of where we really are, as opposed to these, you know, you just see a number and you don't have a context. And I think that's a really important comment or component.
So Lori, thank you so much for your comment. I mean, I think that, again, you know, we're just trying to follow state law as it relates to this report. You know, this report is to essentially convey actions related to the Hotspots program, which does not apply to stationary or area sources. It only applies to stationary sources. We don't want to.
Don't apply to mobile and area sources.
I'm sorry, yes, don't apply to mobile or area sources, only applies to stationary sources. Of course, we know about the significant contributions from mobile sources. We're aware of that. It's just that this program does not apply to mobile sources. And the district does not quantify emissions from mobile sources because, as you know, we have very limited authority when it comes to mobile sources and area sources. Also, we don't have any data or any information related to risks from you know, mobile sources or area sources. So again, because under this program, it only applies to stationary sources. That doesn't mean that we don't recognize the contributions from, you know, other sources of air pollution. It's just that, you know, this report is, it's just very specific to stationary sources. But we will circle back with you and Sarah, you know, to talk more about this and understand your expectations.
Am I still unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I guess the biggest comment would be, or a point of interest, it would be to show the reductions that the stationary sources have done and achieved in the last 20 years and where we are versus what it was 20 years ago. I mean, we need to be showing people we've put out millions and millions of dollars to reduce toxic emissions. And now the threshold and the procedures have changed. So now, yes, the risk has increased, the numbers, but not necessarily what it was before. But we need to be able to explain that in a way that the people in the report can understand it, and to show that, yes, we have made significant progress. That's that's my overall point is, we've worked, I've been in the business for 30 years and where we were from 30 years to now, and we need to make sure we don't do a good enough job showing everybody what we've done. Yes, we need to go ahead, but we need to realize where we were and what, we no longer have the low hanging fruit. We're at the top of the tree on a 30-foot ladder or a 100-foot ladder trying to get the minutest possible reductions and trying to educate people and show that story and how significant it is and the cost that is associated with that to get that minuscule amount and what's the corresponding benefit. That's the picture that I would really like to be shown. Okay, and that's factual. That's data that's all available and to educate people. So.
Thank you, Lori. This is very important, and we appreciate you bringing this up so that the public in general can understand that the overall regional toxic emissions and risk has gone down. I just want to make sure, again, we are looking at a program, the Hotspots program, which looks at very micro localized risk associated with facilities, not the regional risk. And you're absolutely right about regional risk has gone down, but this program requires the APCD to look at individual stationary sources and look at the localized risks associated with those individual sources. So even some of the facilities may have significantly reduced their emissions and risk. If there is still one left that hasn't done that, this program just requires that we provide the right to know to the public that there is in their community a facility that may have a higher risk, and that if that risk is above certain thresholds to engage in risk reduction, and that makes it a level playing field for all facilities. So it's not that one facility takes the burden for everybody else. But again, this looks at a very localized micro level risk, not the regional risk.
And I just want to state that that I wear many hats with being the large industry rep on the advisory board and also the air committee co-chair for IEA. So when I make comments, I'm making comments for a broader base of industries, not necessarily specifically for solar turbines. So I try to say what hat I'm wearing, but just trying to get, like you say, a level playing field for everybody.
No, we appreciate that. Thank you, Lori. Any other hands raised, Janet?
Yes. Neil, oh, I just lost somebody. Sarah Giobi. Sarah?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So kind of along the lines of the last comment then, you do actually have a chart in there that shows that, regional cancer risk going up and down. And maybe it appears that that chart baseline has shifted over the years. And so if you go back to prior hotspot reports, you can see that way back in '89, for example, the risk in Chula Vista was 481, and then it goes down to 190 and 143, and in 2015 it was 116. But now if you look at the number there, it's closer to 400 again. But if I look at the chart that's in your report, what I see is that you guys have sort of backcast it using the new standards. And I'm wondering if it doesn't make more sense to actually show the risks that were calculated during those appropriate periods and that shift to the higher risk, even though the emissions have gone down. But I think that helps tell the same story that we in industry are facing, that many of us have substantially reduced emissions only to see our risk number jump up, even in spite of having significant risk reductions. And I think that that is a little bit obscured in your chart. And I don't think that that explanation is really getting to people, because I think people are actually looking at this report and thinking that stationary sources are doing worse and not better. So, if you're going to leave that.
Oops, I think you muted yourself, Sarah.
Okay, there.
That's better.
Yeah, my mute button had actually disappeared. I think she had to unmute me. Otherwise, I was using the space bar. But I was going to say, if it makes sense to leave that chart in there in the first place, then I think have some integrity and transparency in your process. It probably makes sense to true it up to the actual risks over time and show that blip that occurred with the change of standards. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks again for your suggestion, and we appreciate your interest in showing the overall regional risk. And again, that chart that you're referring to, I believe, as Miney mentioned, does not include diesel particulate matter, and also is showing the overall risk based on ambient monitoring data. It does not distinguish between mobile and stationary and area sources. It's just the overall risk. And the purpose of actually asking John Boudreau from OHIA to join us tonight was to explain why the scientific data has come across to show that the actual risk that we have thought was at some level is now at a different level. It's not that the emissions have gone up, but it's our understanding of how children may be exposed to a higher risk of cancer and non-cancer health effects based on breathing rates and other factors and I think it's just the advancement in scientific data that we are presenting here. We're not suggesting that the industry has increased their emissions, but the actual risk is what it should be presented so that everybody understands what the risk levels are. So we take your comment to heart, and we consider maybe in a different program, not necessarily in the Hotspots annual report, but in a different program, maybe Rob can provide some education through some other means, a community meeting or some forum where you look at the regional overall emissions, regional risk, and how successful we have been in terms of reducing emissions and risk from stationary sources. But again, this program was a mandate from the state that we have to look at individual facilities. But thanks for your comment again, Sarah. Janet, any other hands raised?
Yes, Enrique Medina.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Board
Yes.
member.
Like my fellow board member, Jack Shu, I have been listening very carefully, trying to learn how to be a public member of the board, as previous commenters were concerned about. And I wanted to particularly thank Mayani for your very clear explanation in plain language of what this report is, and also Mohsen and everybody else for defining the parameters of what we're talking about. And of course, there's a lot of other things that could be said. We are experiencing a change in the way that we're doing this. And so I think a fresh look is important. And I think we all need to be cognizant of that and not really be bound by previous formats. And the idea is to have a better explanation for the public to understand what the stationary risks are for health risks from stationary sources. And I think this report does that. And again, I'm here to learn and to listen, and hopefully we'll take all this into consideration when we receive the report next week or 2 weeks from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Medina. Appreciate your comment. Any other comments, Janet?
Yes, Lori.
Janet, Janet, I didn't lower my hand. I don't have any more comments.
Oh, okay. Let's see. We did have a comment on the chat. It would be awesome if someone could show the slide being discussed.
Does this relate to the graph perhaps that was being discussed?
I believe it does.
Would you like to show that, Jim, please?
I can do that.
This is the graph that was in the report, was not in the presentation. So some of the comments that were being made was related to this graph, not the presentation itself, but it is in the report. So
That's correct. And so, Jim, would you mind making a little bit bigger? Maybe it's just me, but my eyes are not very good. There you go. There you go. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jim. So as Mohsen said, this is a graph that is on the report. And essentially what this is conveying, CARB manages two monitoring stations, one in Chula Vista and one in El Cajon. We support them with this program, but these are CARB, I should say California Air Resources Board monitoring stations, so the state. And so these measurements here is essentially, they're measuring what is in the air, the emissions that are in the air, and then they convert these emissions into health risks. So this graph is good, but there are two things about this graph. One is that it excludes diesel particulate matter, which diesel particulate matter is one of our biggest challenges here in terms of health risks. And then the other thing is that this graph, again, it shows what's in the air. So we cannot separate what's coming from stationary source, what's coming from mobile source, what's coming from area sources. It's kind of, it's whatever's in the air. So that's why this graph is good, but it is limited in that sense, because again, it excludes one of our main pollutants, which is diesel particulate matter, which comes from diesel engines, and it causes cancer. And again, it does not make a distinction as far as, which sources are contributing to this risk. Jim, would you like to, I hope I characterize this in a manner that can be understood.
And you had it right, Miney.
yeah, and Miney, if I can just add, again, we're having a informal conversation here, so it's good to try to address some of the comments made earlier. And one of the comments was that the previous reports, these risk levels were maybe lower, and because of the new guidelines that John talked about in terms of how you calculate risk, these numbers may look like they've gone up, they're higher now. And I just actually, when we are conducting these risk assessments reviews, the risk assessment guidelines that are being used for individual stationary sources are incorporating the OHIHA 2015 changes that John discussed. So it wouldn't be appropriate to show the old graph with lower risk numbers, and then compare those to risk from individual facilities where we are using the new guidelines, which almost make it look like that the individual facility is having a much higher risk than the general risk in the region. So we want to just make sure it's apples and apples. So this graph does consider those new guidelines when they calculate the risk. Just wanted to add that in to make sure everybody's aware of that.
And then the only other thing I would add is that I believe in the previous report, this graph also included emissions from stationary sources, but we removed that because it was misleading. Because again, the risk that you see there, it's the risk from all sources. And so, adding emissions just from stationary sources it doesn't establish a you know, a good, you know, relationship. So we felt that, you know, having the emissions just from stationary sources on this graph was somewhat misleading. And so that's also another difference between the graph in this report versus what was published last year or last time. I think there was another question on the chat here. Appendix B2. Basically, the question is, what is the threshold for emissions pounds per year found in Appendix B2? How do I identify which company is in category A and is required to do a health risk assessment?
I can handle that one if you'd like.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate it.
So we have reported the emissions, some of the toxic emissions for every facility that we inventoried. And as we previously mentioned, if a 0 comes out, it's because the source either did not operate that year, is predominantly what it is. Normally they just didn't operate. They went out of business or some other reason had that. So there is no specific threshold for inclusion in the report. It's just if we inventoried the facility, we include them in the report. Then in order to identify which company is in category A and required to do a health risk assessment, that's if the cancer prioritization score is above 100, or either the chronic or acute prioritization scores are above 10. And we do have a chart in the report that with a table that shows those thresholds.
Perhaps we can clarify that, you know, by adding a footnote. And also you can see the facilities they're required to do a health risk assessment, and those are listed in Appendix A2. So Appendix A2 has a list of all the facilities that needed to do a health risk assessment. And in fact, it includes the date that we request the health risk assessment. And if these facilities have submitted a health risk assessment to us, it also includes that date. So, but I think that we can also add a footnote to Appendix B1 to include this threshold that Jim just mentioned, just for clarity.
And then I do see another comment. Why is the data support sorted alphabetically rather than by magnitude? We had to pick something to report to sort it is, and that's how we picked, basically. If you'll notice, we first list by the year that it was inventoried, then we list the facilities by alphabetical or order.
And I think, Jim, it's easier to find the name of the facility if you're listing it alphabetically than having to look at all 100 to see where the risk is from that facility. Any other comments or hands raised?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes. Neil Davenport?
Go ahead, Neil.
I think you can hear me now, sorry.
Yes.
Related question to my earlier question in the representation of category A versus B, and I may have missed it in the reading of the draft report. It's clear what the threshold of category A represents, but the fact that there is a category B and C, I may have missed it, but industry and the public, we don't know what that's going to mean for the future. If there's no implied action coming, is it even necessary to have a category other than A?
Right, so the way the categories work is that a category A facility is required to do a health risk assessment. A category B facility is not currently required, but may be required in the future. Or if the district has reason to believe that they should be doing a health risk assessment, we may know something about the surrounding area, the surrounding topography that might indicate a different risk than what a prioritization score may indicate. And then the category C facilities are the prioritization scores that are very, very low, and those are not required to do a health risk assessment. And that is how the statewide program is set up.
Okay, is that clarity in a rule or a guidance? Maybe I'm forgetting, but if not, it would just be nice to add those extra sentences of clarity to the annual report for the public reader.
Yeah, we'll look at the report. We do have some verbiage in there. Otherwise, there's that same discussion in the prioritization procedures that is on our website. It's a policy.
Got it. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, that is part of the report, and we did include it. There's a whole section about prioritization on the report, and we also include the link for this prioritization procedure that Jim is just mentioned.
Sorry, I should have remembered.
Oh, no problem. It's a long report.
And Neil, think of it as what it says, prioritization. So we prioritize and look at category A first, because those were the ones that resulted in highest numbers. So once we're done with the A, then we'll decide whether B is also a concern or not. And if they are, then some of them may be looked at.
Yeah, I think it just leaves industry to think, well, what should I anticipate? And the public may be thinking, okay, what are you going to do next? So.
Right. No, we appreciate your comment. That was a good question. Any other comments, Janet?
I don't see any more hand raised or new comments in the chat.
Okay, well, with that, we again want to thank you all for participating in this public meeting. Your input is very valuable to San Diego Air Pollution Control District, and we realize that you're taking time away from your personal life to attend these evening meetings, but we would really appreciate if you continue feedback to the district. And again, the email address that's on the chat, if you have any further comments, feel free to send it to us, but try to get it to us by Monday. So if we need to do anything different with the report, we have time to do it before we take it to the governing board. With that, thank you very much, and you all have a good evening. Rob, Maini, Jim, and John, do you have any other closing comments that you would like to make?
No comment.
Hear, hear. That's what I'll say. Excuse me. I'll say hear, hear to you. I appreciate your comments, Mohsen. I agree with them 100%. Thanks to everybody for participating.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, John, for being with us this evening.
John and Jim, you're good?
I'm good. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely.
All right. So this concludes our public meeting on the 2019-2020 draft Aerotoxic Hotspots report. And you all have a good evening. Thank you.